Hey guys, it's Marcelo Nostroza here, the creator and one of the co-hosts of Radio 815. What is Radio 815? It's a podcast celebrating the life and the career of writer-director J.J. Abrams. And I just wanted to let you know that along with my co-host, Matt Crandall, new episodes are posted every Friday at 8:15. So if you love film and TV, and specifically talking about JJ like we do, come and join us, won't you?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Radio 815. I'm your co host, Matt Crandall, here with Marcelo Inostroza. This is episode 2. Last week, in the first episode of our podcast, which is dedicated to the great work of J.J. Abrams, we started at the start with the pilot of Felicity. J.J. Abrams really cut his teeth as a writer in TV with Felicity, and we decided to take a look at the entire first season. Now, that's kind of a cheat. Basically, we didn't have time to rewatch all 22 episodes of season 1. So what Marcelo and I have both done is picked kind of 5 key episodes each that encapsulate sort of the essence of the season. And we thought we would go through and talk about them, and how JJ and the creatives on the show sort of shaped the journey that was Felicity season 1. So, Marcelo, why don't you kick it off with the first episode that you rewatched on your list, episode 2.
Well, I'm glad to be back again. And episode 2 that I chose, the first episode that I chose, was the episode entitled "The Last Stand." The thing that I love about this particular episode is that it sort of picks off from the pilot, obviously, but a sort of a big driving point of this episode is Felicity's parents actually trying to figure out why it is that their daughter made such a rash decision by canceling her original college plans and moving down to New York. And there's this brilliant scene in The Last Stand where Felicity's counselor tries to have a mediation session with Felicity and her parents. And Felicity sort of confesses to her parents why she initially came down to New York. And in that entire sequence, you could just see the pain and anguish, particularly on the face of Felicity's mom, Barbara. I mean, Felicity tells this story in that scene where she was eating a cheeseburger last week or whatever, and she says suddenly it was the best cheeseburger I've ever had. And I thought that the actress who plays Barbara, forgive me, I don't have her name in front of me right now,
Yep.
did such a great job by sort of just the anguish on her face. I love the way that scene was played out, and uh, basically the way that it was depicted. Also, a great thing that I think this episode does in particular is it sort of humanizes Felicity's father to be sort of mysterious, because in the first episode we understand that Felicity's father is kind of controlling and he's kind of my way or the highway. But in this episode, we see that he has a bit of humanity, sorry, to him, and I think that that was a brilliant choice by JJ to do that, to sort of switch the script on his character right away.
Yeah.
Yes, I also, as the episode wraps up, I also like the fact that Felicity and her mom actually have that last conversation, and Felicity's mom tells Felicity that the reason why she got so mad at her wasn't the fact that she moved away to New York, it's the fact that she saw so much of herself in her daughter. And I love the explanation that she gives about how she didn't get to how she didn't get a chance to accomplish the dreams that she set out to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love the whole sequence of them sort of reconnecting after their fight earlier in the episode.
Yeah, I think that's really nice because in the pilot, Felicity's parents were introduced to them, but you don't really care that much about them because it's more focused on her and her breaking away from their dreams for her. So this episode fleshes them out more as characters and, lets the audience sort of realize that they're not just one note rich people who have their whole daughter's life planned out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also another great thing about this, another little subplot in this episode is a subplot where Felicity gets the idea to send her college essay that she wrote to get into the college. She wrote the essay about Ben, so she gets a horrible idea, of sending it to Ben. Yeah. And the whole sequence of her trying to get it back from the mail guy,
right,
is hilarious, and it's just really, really hilarious.
Yeah. And yeah, so that's episode 2. My first episode that I rewatched that I really enjoy is episode 3, called Hot Objects, which was written by JJ, just like episode 2 was written by JJ. Directed by Brad Silberling, who directed the Casper movie, Moonlight Mile, the Lemony Snicket movie. Great director. And here he was working in TV. And I know that we talked a little bit last week, but you sent me a message about how good this show looks. Even for a show this old, and it's only on DVD, so it's not been remastered in high def, and it's not widescreen and all that. But the cinematography and the shots in the show feel like you're watching a high quality movie every week. And I really love just the use of light and shadow. So much of the episodes, people's half of their faces in shadow, half of it's lit. So it adds a lot of atmosphere and mood. The whole main plot of episode 3, Hot Objects, is that Kelvin is throwing a giant party, and it's going to be Felicity's first college party. So she has high expectations. She wants it to go good. She hangs out with Julie. She tells Julie that she wants to invite Ben to the party. And of course, Julie ends up talking to Ben about the party first. So her and Felicity have like a little bit of a confrontation about that. And I really like this episode because while the party is sort of the thing, the social thing, and Felicity's worried about what's going to happen, on a school level, she has an incident with her Professor Garibay, because she can't find the textbook anywhere. And she goes to talk to him and says, I checked everywhere. I couldn't find the textbook. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I don't care. She says, are we okay? He's like, we're not okay. Like, why are you talking to me right now? And it clearly shows the difference between high school and college, where in high school, if you were to talk to a teacher like that, they know your name. There's 25 people in the class, and it's a lot more personal. Whereas when you go to college, it can be a bit of a shell shock, especially for people who are used to, being the teacher's pet. When they find out that it's a lot more impersonal than you would expect. So this teacher is not used to having students come up to him like that. And later in the episode, she runs into him at a supermarket.
Great scene, by the way.
And says, I wasn't trying to be like this kiss ass or anything. And he said, you know what? Don't worry about whether you and me are okay. Worry about whether you are okay. Like, you're a small fish in a big pond now, and you're going to have to adjust to that. And I thought that was really nice, and true to life, because anybody who's gone from high school to college will know it's kind of a completely different ball game. When the party through line of this, Noel is really trying to make sure that the party is a huge hit. He wants to get a lot of chocolate because Felicity told him that she likes chocolate, and he hires these shady Russians to get like the DJ equipment. Mm-hmm. And there's a recurring joke of the one guy who's like, can't we have a band? And Noel's like, no.
Mitch.
Yeah, like we are not having a band. Like it's just CDs and tapes, man. That's all we can afford. And then at the party, Mitch is like, "This party's fine, but it would have been so much better with a band." And it was funny because like there's always that one guy
Mm-hmm.
who's like that, who like even if a party's going good, is kind of like the Debbie Downer of the situation.
Right.
At the party, Felicity and Elena finally get introduced to each other, which is kind of a key moment of the series. They had been around each other, but they actually do like formal introductions there. And of course, the minute that somebody comes into Felicity's room looking for music, we know that one of the tapes is going to get played at the party. And that moment is mortifying. But they don't dwell on it, and it doesn't become as big an issue as it could have. It's just an embarrassing thing that happens, but it's not like nowadays where, if there was a faux pas of yours, it would end up on social media and haunt you forever. So that was kind of interesting because that tape, those people heard it and she was embarrassed, but then it was like, okay, that's it. We'll move on.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, a show now, it would be like, somebody accidentally found a nude on her phone and it went viral or something.
Right.
It would be like the modern day equivalent. So it was nice that it was mortifying and embarrassing and sort of like character building for Felicity, but not as damaging as stuff is like in the modern world now.
Mm-hmm. No, if it was a modern world now, she would be able to live it down at least for a couple months. I would guess. I would gather to guess here.
Yeah, and also in this episode, Ben gets stuck in a drama class, and that's kind of funny seeing him being uncomfortable with that. And his teacher is played by a guy who would go on to be Richie Aprile on The Sopranos, one of my favorite shows of all time. So it's fun when, people who are good working actors show up in smaller roles on shows like this. So episode 3 for me, because it's that party and just everybody is adjusting still.
Mm-hmm.
And the shady Russians are hilarious. They give Noel a hard time because he doesn't have a beeper.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, "You don't have a beeper? I'll get you a pager, man. I'll get you a beeper. Hold on, I get you a beeper." And it's like, oh my gosh, this is so 1998.
Oh my god! And if I could just chime in with one thing that I love about this particular episode, I love the speech that Ben has to give about his keys
Mm-hmm.
and what they mean to him. I think that in that particular scene, we really, for the first time in the series, learn a little bit of a backstory about Ben and where he comes from, and
Mm-hmm. A true backstory.
yeah. Until prior to that moment, he's always been just the guy that Felicity likes. But after that moment, I thought that JJ did a great job of giving him some dimensions.
Right.
And
He started to become a person more than just a MacGuffin kind of thing.
right, yeah, McGuffin guy. Yeah. So the episode that I have next is an episode called Cheating. It's episode 6, and the thing that I love about this episode, well, there's one thing that I love about this episode is that throughout the series, it is shortly established that Felicity is a nerd, and if
Right.
you know anything about nerds, all they care about is doing the best they can and doing their assignments, whether they be in high school or college, to the best of their abilities. So when Ben has a problem with his computer printer, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
he gives Felicity his paper to print out on her computer, and she starts to read it, and then she rewrites it, and then she drops it off to their teachers in this little box in the hallway that they have,
Yep.
and then she doesn't tell Ben, and as a result, Ben's teacher accuses Ben of cheating because Ben's teacher doesn't believe that Ben could progress that quickly in the class. And the thing that I like about this is two things. I like the fact that the writers of this episode chose to make the decision to make Felicity feel the anger of doing something so stupid and
Right.
so asinine that it is unconscionable how she could do something so like dumbfounded. I mean, look,
Yeah.
I understand liking someone, but doing something like that, I mean, are you telling me she didn't have a moment where she said, maybe I shouldn't do this?
Right.
So the fact that the writers in this specific episode, basically uh, put Felicity through that trial and made the wedge between the relationship between her and Ben, I thought was great. And in the end, that she actually, in the end, where Ben confesses that he actually didn't write the paper, and the fact that he sort of sacrificed himself, he sort of fell on the grenade to protect Felicity, I thought was great.
Yeah.
Also, the other thing I thought was great was the sort of subplot of this episode where Noel starts talking to the school president for advice about people who cheat and what can possibly happen to them as a result of being accused of plagiarism.
Right.
Yeah, and that's all I really have to say about episode 6, cheating. And I just think it's a good episode. It doesn't really do a lot of character development for what comes later, but I think it's just a fun episode with some serious consequences for some of our characters.
Yeah, and some of those consequences are explored more in your next episodes, which is the two-parter 7 and 8, Drawing the Line.
Yeah. Did you have that on your list, or was that just me?
That was just you. But great episode. Definitely things start to get a bit more serious across the board. With the Julie storyline especially.
Yeah. So what's your next episode on your list?
So the next one on my list is Thanksgiving, which comes after these episodes. So we'll talk about these first,
okay,
and then we'll move on to mine.
Yeah, my bag though. I completely didn't know the order of these things. I just sort of picked them out of a bag. So I will. The thing that I love about Drawing a Line is that the episode starts off with this random thing about Noel being not so comfortable about hearing Felicity's big dark secrets about Ben. So he finally gets to the point of, guys, should I tell her that I'm not comfortable hearing stuff about Ben? But if I do that, will I lose her friendship forever? So I thought that was a nice little subplot to sort of mislead us as to what this episode is really about.
Right.
I can't remember off the top of my head, when was the pink guy introduced?
I think it might have been around here somewhere.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, in this particular episode, Julie happens to meet a guy by let's call him Mr. Pink for the purposes of this podcast. And she actually starts to go out with this guy, and at the end of this episode, I believe it's at the end of this episode, that we find out that Julie went out with this guy, and when she did go out with this guy, something terrible happened. And I love the last sequence of this episode where Felicity comes into Julie's room, and all you see is the empty mattress and the sheets all in the corner and buried in the wastebasket.
Yeah.
I thought that it was very ballsy and very forward-thinking by JJ and his co-writer of this episode to talk about something so serious so early in a show like this.
Right.
It's not something that you expect in a show about a teenager going to New York to follow a guy. You don't expect a story about about something like this. And I think that it was just an excellent decision by JJ and his staff to explore a story like this. And in part 2 of Drawing the Line, when that episode first starts off, you have Julie standing, sitting in the nurse exam room, and you have her relaying the events of the night. And I'm not kidding you. The first time I saw it, as she goes through the events of what happened to her, I got sick to my stomach. I just thought that um, what's her name? Oh my god, I can't remember her name right now. Jesus Christ. Amy Jo Johnson
Yeah.
played it so well and played it with such pace. She gave herself little pauses here and there as she was going through the story.
Right.
And um, also in this episode, we start to see the effects of what happened to Julie sort of manifest. Not not right away, but uh, little things like when Felicity asks her if she wants to go out or if she wants to get together later or whatever. Julie sort of backs up and retreats and goes, I believe, in her room or play music or something like that.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that we see the effects of what trauma can do to a person that's been raped.
Yeah. And this was the episode, this whole arc kind of was where, there had been serious stuff on the show, but this was where they weren't going to shy away from like the more controversial real life situations, especially like, you hear about this kind of thing happening when people go to university and college. And especially, nowadays, consent and all that stuff, it's even more well known. Like, uh, it's a huge issue. There's an epidemic sometimes, and people are afraid to speak up. So the way they handled that whole thing with Julie was really classy and showed that the show wasn't afraid to tackle hard-hitting subjects when needed. Especially, it's the first half of the first year.
Yeah, it's it's really the other thing, like I said, it's really early too. So, like I said, you wouldn't expect them to do something like this. So I thought, again, the fact that they did do something like this, the fact that they addressed something like this, like you said, I thought was a great decision, but on their part.
Yeah. So the next one on my list is episode 9 that comes right after this, Thanksgiving, where a lot of people are supposed to be going home for Thanksgiving, but everybody ends up staying for like a big, the gang's all here kind of moment. This episode was written by Andrea Newman and directed by Danny Liner, who would end up going on to direct Dude, Where's My Car and Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. So there are some pretty funny moments in it, but it's still, a Felicity episode. And it starts with her and Javier talking at Dina DeLuca, and I absolutely love Ian Gomez as Javier. Just hilarious.
Yeah, he's great.
Such a character. And, of course, this episode is also noteworthy because it's Jennifer Garner's first episode. As Hannah comes, Noel's girlfriend, who, people didn't really know about, shows up just as, Noel and Felicity are getting together. And she says, I've been accepted. I can move to New York. And Noel is not excited, which is not the reaction she wanted. And there's a really nice scene where, Hannah and Noel kind of realize that maybe they have different ideas of what their future is. More so, Hannah realizes Noel has a different idea. And I thought that the writing in that was really nice, where she says, I've been getting close to some guy and we weren't sure what it is, but we're not sure if that's actually true or if she's just making it up so that Noel will confess that something's going on, because she gets the sense that something is off. And when her and Felicity have that moment in the bathroom where Jennifer Garner is breaking down and Felicity hands her some tissues, and Hannah just says to Felicity, he's a great guy, and Felicity says, I know. It's a really loaded moment, but it was handled well. It wasn't like, they could have introduced Hannah and had her be, because we already like Noel and we want Noel and Felicity to maybe get together. Sometimes shows introduce the girlfriend and she's a shrew, or she's like a real annoying character, right? So that we root against her. But they introduce Hannah, and Jennifer Garner's so charismatic, and the character is also as well. And they start planting those small seeds of her and Noel not being on the same page, where Hannah says she bought a PC and Noel is like, but we are Mac people. How did this happen? And it just sort of shows, as people, even when they're close together, when they're apart, small things can start to put cracks in the foundation. And I thought that was nice. And then, of course, when everybody is at Thanksgiving, um, Sean, Ben, Elena, everybody is there. And that's a really nice sequence of just everybody sort of, no matter what's gone on, the breakups, the kissing. This is the episode also where Ben does walk in and sees Noel and Felicity kissing, so he knows something else is going on. But for them to all just put that all aside and have this nice big, their new family dinner for Thanksgiving was really sweet.
Did you think that Felicity intended to like fall in love with Noel so hard, or did you think that at the beginning she just wanted she just thought that this was a like a small crush, like a passing crush, like Noel pointed out?
Yeah, I don't think she did. Like she did think it was maybe just going to be a fleeting thing, but they had a pretty good connection, and just their banter with each other and the way that they get each other made them seem kind of like a natural fit, and it was organic. It wasn't just like one episode and all of a sudden, she's moved on from Ben or anything like that. So much had gone on that I thought it was actually believable. So even though the show was supposed to be, Felicity and Ben, you start to like Felicity and Noel together.
Right, right. The thing that I love about this episode is the I think it's the B plot or the C plot, the story point of that has to do with Elena and the fact that she when she goes home to spend Thanksgiving with her father, we realize that she doesn't have that great of a relationship with her father. And I love the fact where she actually sits down with him at one point and she actually mentions to him, I don't live that far away either. It's a the street has two lines to it, right? So I just love the fact that among all this happiness and all this relationship drama, as Felicity is known to do, that we get a sort of little story that says something about a character that we just recently met in the character of Elena.
Yeah, it does add depth to her, because when she goes home, she thought that Thanksgiving was just going to be her and her dad, and he has other plans. He wants them to, hang out with all these people, and she's like, well, I hardly ever see you. And like you point out, he says they sort of realize, it's a two-way street, their relationship. So it is a nice moment when he does show up to the Thanksgiving dinner at the end.
Yeah, also a thing that I thought this episode does well is the fact that we actually see the progression of Julie dealing with the rape, in that she has a discussion with Felicity where she sort of molds the thought of going home for Thanksgiving and facing her parents, and physically telling her parents what happened. And,
right. She's not ready.
Sorry. And watching her mull over that decision and choosing to stay with Felicity and stay with her friends, I think was the good choice and the right choice for her at this point.
Yeah, I thought that was really well done too.
So the episode that I have next is an episode called Finally, and it's episode 10. I would have to say that among all the first season episodes of Felicity Season 1, this one is my favorite. Because when I was going to school, I used to love the end of the year. And I used to love Christmas time. I don't love Christmas time anymore because I'm an adult and I gotta buy presents for I gotta buy presents for everyone. And
it's sucks. Expensive.
It sucks. Yeah. So I love the fact that this episode is encapsulated around finals week.
Yeah.
Also, I love the fact that this episode has an editorial choice that I thoroughly loved. When they throughout the episode they break it up by having title cards telling you how long they have until final exams start.
Right. And not only that, so much of this episode is subtitled when people are whispering,
In the
but then
library, yeah.
but then also when people are not whispering and it's still in the library, the subtitles keep going.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
hilarious. This
Yeah.
episode was also on my list of ones I rewatched because I think this is one of my favorite episodes of the entire season. This one is like really enjoyable and funny, written by JJ. One of the key episodes for sure.
Mm-hmm. No, I just, and the other thing that I love about this episode, I don't know who directed it. I wasn't paying attention to that. I'm sorry. I didn't do my proper homework right. But this episode has an energy to it and a pace to it.
Yeah.
It's like this episode has a ticking clock to it, which it obviously does.
Yeah.
And the scene that I love, like my one of my all time favorite scenes of Felicity is when Noel finally loses it, and he goes.
When he's on the magic powder that Megan gave him that has beats in it that it causes Noel to flip out anyway. But just as Felicity and Ben are in the library or whatever, the study hall, talking about how great Felicity and Noel's relationship is, Noel bursts in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just love the way that Scott Foley loses it and says, "No, you're supposed to be helping me." No, I just lose it every time he does that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's just great. Also, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say no. That whole scene is hilarious because Scott plays it so well. Just like he's manic, but he's stressed because it's finals and he doesn't have any of his notes because he's accidentally got the wrong bag from the airport. But just that manicness where he bursts in at the worst possible time and overreacts, and the minute he does it, he knows that it was the wrong thing.
Yeah, but it's like once he starts, he can't back
stop.
out.
Yeah.
So he may have been aware that it was the wrong thing, like you said, but he can't back out.
Right. Yeah, he had to double down on it almost.
Yeah. Also, a great thing that this episode does, a sort of funny thing that I wish the writers would have explored. Well, they kind of explore it in other episodes, but they don't kind of. Is Sean's plot to sell college kids fruit.
This was my favorite part of the episode, to be honest with you.
Oh, really?
So I always love that in the first season, like there's a couple times where Sean is like cooking up some sort of like invention or like harebrained scheme. But this one is the best because everybody is like, why would you sell fruit? And he's like, it's fruit. Like fruit is delicious. This is a can't miss plan. Mm-hmm. And then of course when he's trying to sell the fruit in these giant coolers and nobody is buying, and then he has the epiphany that all you have to do to sell a guy in university a banana is have a pretty girl offer it to him. Right, and when Julie then starts selling it all at just Grunberg is hilarious, but by the time when he's counting the cash at the end, and then he's like, I got 2 things left. He's like, go off and don't come back with any less than $4. Like, just hilarious. I could just see, like, this is Sean, but I can almost see, like, a guy like Greg Grunberg coming up with a scheme like this while him and JJ were hanging out, in high school or something, and having it be based on their actual relationship. But I love how Sean is just this guy who's always trying to find an angle, right. And this one offering fresh fruit to university students that he thinks is this can't miss genius idea. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I don't know, man, if you had offered chips and Oreos, you probably would have had a better shot.
Yeah, I know. But the thing that I love about this whole the whole plot is that I think, or you can stop me if I'm reading too much into this, I think that once Sean started using Julie to sell fruit, I kind of think that Sean got feelings for Julie, or did he have feelings for that library girl that he couldn't ask out?
No, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Especially if you ever have come up with like some sort of scheme with someone and you're like successful at it, that kind of endears you to each other. So I think that we're planting some seeds there.
Mm-hmm. No, and it's there. A possible relationship between Julie and Sean is hinted at in other episodes, but the writers really never sort of picked it up again and ran with it, which I thought was a kind of a missed opportunity.
Yeah, it also could have been part of a long game that never ended up coming to fruition because of the circumstances around Amy Jo Johnson on the show.
Right. Where she
Which
eventually.
yeah, we can talk about more in depth as we get to where she kind of just disappears because her own personal life was too overwhelming, which is too bad. One other thing I want to make a note about this episode, hilarious bit with Noel having to be the RA, and Richard barbecuing in his room.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Richard, played by Rob Benedict, who would go on to be a key recurring character on one of my favorite long-running shows, Supernatural. So any fans of Supernatural will recognize Chuck. And I just love that this guy is barbecuing in his room, which when I went to university, like there were idiots who would do stuff like this. Where you're just like, this is so dangerous. You shouldn't be doing it. And they're like, don't worry, nothing bad will ever happen. And then of course, there were people that bad things happened. So this was perfect. And the fact that then this guy tries to blackmail Noel because he sees Noel and Felicity making out. And by the end, Noel brings him a bag of charcoal briquettes, and he's just like, "I give up. Like, you got me. There's nothing I can do about it." Which is a nice bit of like throwaway D storyline comic business, but it just makes this episode really enjoyable. And there is a little bit of a heavy part to this episode, as much as there is a lot of fun humor, where Noel disappears for a bit because his uncle is in a serious accident, and then when he disappears at the end, it's because his uncle died.
Right.
And then he comes back, and him and Felicity decide, they don't really need to put a label on their relationship until the new year. They don't have to rush into it, which was kind of part of the ticking clock was finals, but also they had agreed that when finals were over, they were going to decide what they were. And the fact that they table that was kind of interesting as well.
Mm-hmm. No, I had totally forgotten about that little subplot about Noel having to deal with the death of his grandfather. But do you think that the reason that they didn't deal with that is because of the subject matter of the episode? Do you think they wanted to focus more on the finals thing?
Yeah.
Instead of their, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that they wanted to show that, serious stuff still happens while you're at school, and sometimes because you're at school and it's so important, that other stuff can't overwhelm your life in certain ways. Like, I'm sure that this is a devastating loss to Noel, but he still had to be there to take his finals.
Right.
And I know when I was in my second year at university, 2 weeks before first term finals, my grandmother died, and you only have like a couple of days to do everything because university won't put everything on hold because a family member dies. So it was kind of like a true to life thing, without them wanting it to overwhelm the episode. But I think that was just kind of like acknowledging that, even though our characters are here, real life still goes on and it's messy.
Mm-hmm. No, I thought, like I said before, this is probably the top favorite episode for me in season 1. So do you have any more episodes on your list, or do you want me to give you my last one?
Basically your last one comes before my last 2.
Yes.
And I've got just 2 more.
Okay.
But yours is a 2-parter.
Yeah, okay, so I'll go first. See, folks, this proves which guy actually does more research. So Matt does more research than I do. So
it's early. I think we both are doing quite a bit of research because you seem to remember some of the smaller details I don't.
Right. Yeah. So the next episode that I'm going to talk about is an episode called Todd Mulcahy. I'm sorry if I butchered the last name of that guy.
No, that's right. You got it.
But the thing that I particularly identify with in this episode is, well, I should tell you the main plot of this episode. The main plot about this episode is that a guy from Felicity's past comes back to New York and starts sending Felicity giant boxes of crap that
Right.
that she enjoyed when she was a child. And the reason why he does this is because he is actually getting married to his fiancee in like the next couple of weeks, and he wanted to come to New York to sort of sterilize Felicity from his life, for lack of a better word.
Hmm.
And I love the way that he pursues Felicity, even after constantly Felicity tells him, "No, I have no interest in, uh, uh, um, you know, uh, I have no interest in undergoing a romantic relationship with you." I mean, at first Felicity is understandably flattered, but as the episode goes on, she gets more and more uncomfortable with it.
Yep.
And the reason why that rings true to me is because in my life, a little bit about myself here, I did something like that, and it didn't go well. As a matter of fact,
Yep.
uh, be, because of that, I was almost depressed for a year. So, um, seeing the actor who plays Tom Mulcahy get hit by a bus at the end of part one was like, man, I feel your pain. I
Yep.
really do, because I got hit by a bus in my own life.
Right.
So, not figuratively, but I identified with his character so much, and I identified with his urge to tell Felicity what he wanted to tell her.
Hmm.
So, do you have any particular recollections about this episode, or what you like about it?
Yeah, you know what is, and this is actually, especially for this podcast, makes a good sense to be one of the episodes on here. I probably should have rewatched this two-parter because JJ wrote and directed both of these episodes.
That's right, he did.
So he not only wrote them, he directed. He stepped up to directing, and it did sort of tackle this, weird, this guy has unrequited feelings and stuff, which is kind of a common occurrence. And also of note, I don't know if people just hate JJ or what it is. This is the lowest episodes of Felicity on IMDb in terms of rating for the entire season.
Really, I didn't see that.
Now, I don't listen to what IMDb says,
No,
but both
no.
of these have like a 5.6 out of 10, whereas most of the rest of the season is like 7.8s and
Right.
8 and stuff. And I think it's partly because it's some of this episodes, the two, it's just uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
for Felicity. And then also you have the storyline with Julie tracking down her biological mother,
That's right.
who denies that she's her biological mother, which again is also like uncomfortable and just one of those, like, it's a lot of real life stuff happens in these two episodes, especially coming off of the fun of finally, and before this, the whole sex episode and stuff. I think
You know.
yeah. I think this, the reason that maybe it rubs some people the wrong way is that it brings everything back to like stark reality kind of right away.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, and the other thing that I loved about this episode is it turns the conceit of Felicity on its head, in
Yep.
that the series is about a girl who follows a guy to New York and then starts to sort of un sort of sort of uh, sort of, what's the word in there? Profess her love for him unwantingly. So to have Felicity deal with someone who actually does the same thing that she did to Ben.
Right. It's turning the tables on Felicity, putting the shoe on the other foot.
Right, right. I thought that was a great conceit.
Yes.
For them for JJ to actually come up with this story, and to have Felicity get a taste of her own medicine, so to speak.
Oh, big time.
Yeah. Also, I love the fact that this two-parter sort of served as a a wake-up call for Felicity, in that after this episode, she she goes in to deal with some of her other interests besides medicine.
Mm-hmm.
She goes into I believe she signs up for an art class because of what Tom Mulcahy said to her in a letter that he wrote for her when he was like 6.
Right.
So I love the fact that this uh, made Felicity look at her life through um, a different lens, and sort of brought her back to her childhood in some aspects.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So what's next on your list?
Next one on my list is season 1, episode 18, Happy Birthday, which again is kind of a decent episode where Noel has found out that Felicity slept with someone else, and he's very uncomfortable, and he thinks he needs to move out. He needs to quit being an RA and just move out. So he's obsessed with that. Sean is trying to create this anti-headache machine that looks like a big hula hoop for your head. And the problem is he can't test it because he never has a headache. So he's like, I need to test this thing to see if it cures headaches. But the problem is, like, I never have a headache. So that was really funny. And this is the one where Jane Kasmerick comes back and says to Julie, I am actually your mother. I don't know why I denied it. And then, Julie's really excited that she's going to have another family. And then she kind of pumps the brakes and says, oh, I never told my husband I had a baby. So, like, stop putting the cart before the horse. That's not what this is. Mm-hmm. So there's, fun stuff and heavy stuff in this one, mostly with Noel thinking that he's going to move out. The other fun stuff in this one, and the reason that it's on this list is mostly because of this storyline where Megan's parents come to visit.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
and Megan completely transforms herself to,
just
goody two shoes, normal girl. And she makes sure the box is now Felicity's, that Felicity won't let anyone open. So that stuff is really, really funny and endearing. Just seeing how different Megan is when her parents are in town.
Mm-hmm. No, actually, crap. I was totally gonna say something, but I totally forgot what I was gonna say. Crap. I really, the thing that I sort of understand about this episode, well, not understand, the thing that I relate to the most in this episode is the fact that Noel's paranoia about Felicity possibly sleeping with someone. Mm-hmm. When I was in a relationship with somebody a while back, it's been a while back, but that actually happened to me. So I felt really, really sympathetic for Noel in his situation. Now I wouldn't exactly gone about it the way that he did, but I thought that it was just an interesting way for the writers to play it, and the way that Scott Foley plays it is just great. Also, seeing another side of Megan and seeing that that she had a different side to her when her parents come to visit really gives you a nice insight into her psyche and how she grew up. Mm-hmm. Perhaps the reason why she's so wild and crazy and got skulls all over the place is because, maybe she had a repressed childhood. So I think, with that being said, I think what JJ did and what the writers did with her character is just great. And to see the other side of the coin, where that wild child came from and why it came out of her, is just great.
Yeah, really good stuff in that one. And then the final episode that I revisited was the season finale. Felicity Was Here, written by JJ, directed by Matt Reeves again. That basically has this love triangle coming to a head because Noel wants Felicity to go with him to Europe for 2 weeks, and Ben wants Felicity to drive with him cross country for 2 weeks. And she's trying to basically decide what she wants to do. She likes Noel. Things are complicated. Julie is sad over her breakup with Ben. She wants Felicity to sort of keep an eye out, but then she finds out that it's Felicity that Ben has feelings for. and everything kind of gets blown up. And then, of course, it ends with Felicity making a choice, but we don't know what the choice is at this point. Lots of other stuff is going on within the finale. It starts just, with a pretty funny scene with Danny, played by Curtis Armstrong, at Dean and DeLuca, Booger from Revenge of the Nerds, also a key recurring character on Supernatural as well. This guy, I think they must have had the same casting directors. And they talk about Ben's new haircut a bit. Yeah, which, of course, this wasn't the famous Felicity haircut, but this is foreshadowing that, this show wasn't afraid to do something kind of drastic with their characters, because Ben gets quite a different hairstyle that they, an episode or whatever before this, but this guy brings it up. And just to have, Felicity and Julie not be in a good place by the time this episode ends is kind of heartbreaking. For Felicity to have to make a choice between Noel and Ben, where, we know that Noel is a good guy. He really does like Felicity, and that would probably be a good pair. But, as Ben's trying to convince Felicity to go on this road trip, he finally leans in and kisses her and says, I've been dying to do this for a long time. Right. You know this is what you want. And she kind of can't deny it. Right. So it makes things really complicated. And especially then when Noel finds out that everything is so complicated, more complicated than he thought, it makes her choice even harder.
No, the thing that I really like about this episode, like you stated, is sort of brings together all the main story plots that have been driving this season, and it kind of blows them up in little different ways. And I love the fact that when Felicity does get that first kiss from Ben, the way that she reacts is so different to the way that she would have reacted if he would have done it in episode 10.
Right. Yeah, big time.
And the fact that she just sort of she's not disgusted by it, but she's sort of like, well, not indifferent, but the way that she runs out of the room.
Yeah, she's taken off guard a bit, and it's not like this big romantic comedy moment. It's something else.
Right. The only issue that it's not an issue that I particularly have with this episode, but the only issue that I have with the way that specifically season 1 and I believe season 2 were structured is that for the first 2 seasons, this is a bit of a spoiler, but it's something minor. For the first 2 seasons, at the end of the first 2 seasons, Felicity has a choice to make, right? Whether she's going to go here or here,
right?
And I sort of wish that they would have made her predicament something a little different.
Yeah.
I understand how hard it is to write TV. I mean, I write TV for a living. I understand how hard it is, but I really wish that they would have gone, that they would have possibly made another conceit for season 2. Am I alone in this, or do you feel kind of like similar, or not at all?
No, it is one of those things where that's kind of like the most formulaic thing that Felicity kind of did.
Mm-hmm, right.
Especially in that first season, like they tackled so many uncharacteristically hard-hitting topics and had such unique characters. But her having to make a choice between these 2 dreamboats, and everybody's sort of dying to be with Felicity is kind of like that happens on 25 shows a season kind of thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, and I really, the thing that I loved most about this first season is I thought that it really captured the college experience really well. Mm-hmm. And it really was a slice in time, per se, because this show, like Matt pointed out in the start, was made in 98, I believe. Mm. And in 98, we didn't have social media. We didn't have the internet the way we do now. Hey, we didn't even have cell phones in our pockets.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a scene in the finale where or one of the episodes where Ben's just hanging out, waiting by the phone. And
Yeah.
it's like people like that doesn't happen anymore. You don't stay home because you're waiting for a phone call.
Right. You stay home for other reasons.
Yeah.
But I love the sort of old-fashioned '90s feel about this first season in particular, and that feel doesn't go away from me. Would you agree with that, or would you take it down another road or anything
No,
like
I totally think that this feels at once it's a time capsule of that era
that? Hmm.
because there are a lot of stuff that's inherently late 90s, but also just the themes in your first year of college. A lot of those things are universal. So, like, even though I went to university in Canada, there's a lot of stuff that happens on Felicity with people fighting and, saying stuff behind people's backs and
Hmm.
cheating and plagiarism and all of those things. Like, guy barbecuing in his dorm room. Like, these are the things that, no matter where you're from, if you've had an experience similar to that, they kind of translate.
Hmm.
And that's
No.
what makes Felicity stand the test of time and be kind of universal. The only thing that would make this show more 90s is if the DVDs actually had all the original songs.
That's a point. That reminds me of two points that I want to bring up before we actually wrap this episode up. Um, I don't know about you, but I discovered Felicity on DVD, so I didn't actually initially watch it when it was on the air.
Right.
So, all the music that I thought was used during season one, as well as the score by the same gentleman who did the score for The West Wing, is
Yeah,
phenomenal.
Snuffy. W.G.
Yeah.
Snuffy Walden.
Yeah, Snuffy Walden. Thank you, research man of the show, because I'm good for nothing. Um, I just love all the music choices that the music supervisor made and the score that Snuffy put on this first season.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, um, the score and the music that was put on the DVD didn't bother me at all, which is kind of funny because there's this person right now who is remastering Felicity, and she's putting all the original music in.
Well, that would be amazing. I know there. I think the only two episodes that have the original music is the pilot and the finale.
Really?
Like maybe I'm wrong, but I know that the pilot definitely did. And because even in the finale, there was finally like a real song where Noel is packing and ready to get Felicity to go with him, and that song "Tempted by the Fruit of Another" is playing, and it's like so on the nose for like the situation that's going on, unbeknownst to Noel, that it was kind of perfect. But throughout the other episodes, for the most part, it doesn't take away from the show at all. But when you're watching an episode like Hot Objects and they're throwing their big party, and the people are dancing to like nondescript rock electronic song or whatever it is, and I'm like, I bet that this was like a really timely hit that they had actually licensed when this aired, and now it's just like generic kind of pop tune that doesn't have any resonance because it's not a real song. It's a real song, but it's not like a hit, you know?
So you think that they initially had another song over the dance sequence in Hot Objects, and they they replaced it for the DVD?
Yeah, and there's a couple of times where the songs that they have chosen sound like so much so that I think like they went online and like were like, get me a song that sounds like, the Cranberries or something, and then they would plug in a song that is not the Cranberries, who would have been too expensive to license, but something that sounds vaguely in that vein. And I think that's how they kind of did the licensing for the DVDs, just because it wouldn't have been cost prohibitive to get all the rights to the original music and still turn a profit by putting a show like this out.
Mm-hmm. No, the last thing I want to say here before we wrap up, unless you have any final thoughts.
No, go ahead. You're good.
No, like I said, I thought that this was a great first season with some really, really impactful storytelling and some sort of funny storytelling by episodes that we mentioned uh, off the top and throughout the course of this and throughout the course of the episode. But this series sort of really, I won't say defined a generation, but it certainly meant a lot to me for reasons that we'll get into as we go along here.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought that this season really landed well with me and landed well with its audience. So, with that being said, Matt, do you want to close out the show?
Yeah, and I totally agree. The first season, very strong season. It set itself apart from some of the other CW shows, or the WB. Sorry, WB at the time,
That's
CW
okay.
CW now. Yeah,
I do that all the time.
yeah, but still feels like, birds of a feather with, you could see this fitting on the same network as Dawson and Buffy. So it still feels of that ilk, that quality, but it had its own unique voice. And the first season is one of the best seasons, and I really enjoyed it. And certainly JJ and Matt Reeves guiding it made some interesting choices and really set the voice of the show and the tone of the show for going forward. So, next week we will take a look at our season 2. We'll begin our journey on that.
Mm-hmm. So, with that being said, for my co-host Matt Crandall, I am Marcelo Nostroza saying, P.S. We'll talk back to you guys soon. See you guys next week.